Power lies in awareness, not in reaction. When you finally begin to see the pattern, the grip that once held you so tightly begins to dissolve. Most men live their lives reacting to words, to gestures, to validation, to silence. They don't realize they are dancing to music they didn't choose, pulled into a rhythm that was designed to keep them moving without ever questioning why. But the moment awareness enters, the moment you recognize the pattern, the chains of reaction fall away. It is not strength of muscle or loudness of voice that gives a man his power. It is his ability to see clearly. Awareness is what makes you untouchable. Consider how often people try to gain influence over you without ever needing to force you. They don't need to push, they simply nudge. They give attention, they withdraw attention. They feed your ego, then starve it. They give you just enough to keep you hooked, and then they take it away to keep you chasing. This works because most men react without awareness. They feel the pull and they obey. They don't stop to ask themselves, what is happening here? Why am I being drawn in this direction? Who actually benefits from this reaction? The one who cannot see will always remain a puppet, even if he thinks he's in control. But when awareness arrives, the illusion collapses. Imagine a magician performing a trick. The first time you see it, you're amazed, confused, desperate to figure out how it happened. But once someone shows you the mechanics behind the trick, the wires, the sleight of hand, the distraction, you can never be fooled by it again. You might watch the same performance, but now your eyes are sharper. You see the card hidden in the sleeve, you notice the assistant's subtle movements. Awareness doesn't just change the moment, it changes you. You are no longer a participant in the deception, you are an observer who cannot be manipulated. This is why awareness is far more powerful than reaction. Reaction keeps you trapped in the moment, always one step behind. Awareness places you above the moment, letting you anticipate, predict, and decide. The man who reacts is always led, the man who is aware always leads. And leadership isn't about controlling others. It's about controlling yourself so deeply that no one else can. Think about how many arguments, conflicts, or moments of weakness in your life were born from reaction. Someone said something, and you responded with anger. Someone withheld attention, and you chased after it. Someone pulled away, and you panicked. Every time you reacted without awareness, you gave away your power. But the man who notices the pattern doesn't play the game. He sees the silence not as rejection, but as strategy. He sees the provocation not as a reason to explode, but as an invitation to stay calm. He sees the manipulation not as truth, but as theater. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's what makes awareness permanent. You don't need to memorize rules or tactics. You simply understand the rhythm behind the actions. It's like hearing a song and suddenly recognizing the beat. Once you catch the beat, you can't lose it. Every word, every gesture, every pause becomes predictable, almost obvious. The fog clears and you realize it was never as complicated as it seemed. Awareness brings with it a new kind of strength. The strength to pause, the strength to choose, the strength to not give what is expected. And in that pause lies power. Because the moment you stop being predictable, the moment you stop being easily provoked, the entire game flips. What once controlled you now loses its hold. What once made you restless now makes you smile. What once dictated your actions now exposes its weakness in your clarity. Reaction was slavery, but awareness is freedom. Clarity beats illusion every time. The things that once felt mysterious, complicated, and out of reach lose their power the moment you truly understand them. Illusion thrives in confusion, in half-truths, in the fog where you can't tell what's real and what's not. It feeds on uncertainty, making you doubt yourself, making you second guess, making you think there is something magical about what is happening. But once clarity cuts through, once the fog clears, you realize there was never anything extraordinary about the illusion. It only worked because you couldn't see clearly. Illusions are powerful not because they are real, but because they seem real. Just like a shadow in the dark looks like a monster until you switch on the light and see it's nothing more than a chair in the corner. As long as the room stays dark, fear grows. But one flick of the switch, and the illusion dies instantly. That's the nature of all illusions. They only survive in the absence of clarity. The sextry disappears. Life is full of situations where illusions hold men captive. The illusion of approval, where you believe someone else's acceptance defines your worth. The illusion of scarcity, where you think you'll never find another chance, another opportunity, another connection. The illusion of control, where you imagine someone else is pulling the strings of your life. None of these illusions are unbreakable. They all collapse the moment you gain clarity. Because clarity shows you what's really happening behind the curtain, and suddenly the spell loses its effect. Think about when you were younger and believed that certain people were untouchable, beyond your reach, almost godlike in their presence. Maybe it was a teacher, a boss, a leader, or someone you admired. They seemed mysterious, larger than life. But the moment you saw them in an unguarded human moment, when they made a mistake, when they admitted fear, when you saw behind the polished surface, the illusion cracked. They were no longer a mystery. They were just human. That is what clarity does. It levels the playing field. It takes what looked impossible and makes it simple. Clarity doesn't just destroy illusions, it gives you back control. Because when you understand something, You stop overthinking it. You stop assigning power where there is none. You stop chasing after shadows. A man who lives in clarity cannot be manipulated by appearances. He sees beyond the surface. He sees the patterns, the motives, the cycles. And when he sees them, he can choose his response. He doesn't react to the illusion, he acts from understanding. This is why clarity is the great equalizer. It doesn't matter how polished the act, how clever the game, how elaborate the disguise, clarity always wins. The man who sees clearly cannot be controlled by mystery. He isn't fooled by silence, isn't trapped by games, isn't swayed by illusions of grandeur. He understands that mystery only exists where knowledge is absent, and he makes it his mission to strip away confusion until only truth remains. The beauty of clarity is that it doesn't require force. You don't need to fight illusions, you only need to understand them. Once you see the truth, the illusion falls apart on its own. Like a magician's trick, it cannot survive once the method is revealed. And once you've seen through it, you can never go back to being fooled again. The same trick loses its magic forever. So clarity is not just about knowledge, it's about freedom. It frees you from the grip of confusion, from the power of appearances, from the weight of things that only seem bigger than they really were. Clarity makes you strong not because it gives you more, but because it takes away the lies that once weakened you. And in that light, you realize that what once looked untouchable was only untouchable until you understood it. Choice is the real game changer. The moment you understand that you always have a choice, the weight of manipulation begins to collapse. Most men go through life convinced they are trapped, believing they have no options, thinking the circumstances or the people around them dictate their path. That belief is exactly what keeps them stuck. Manipulation works because it convinces you there is only one road ahead, one response you can give, one action you must take. But the truth is there has never been a situation in which you had no choice. You may not control every outcome, but you always control your response. Think about it. Every game of power depends on the assumption that you will react in a predictable way. Someone withholds attention and they expect you to chase. Someone criticizes you and they expect you to defend yourself. Someone offers approval and they expect you to bend in gratitude. The trap isn't in the action itself, but in your belief that you have no other option but to react as expected. When you recognize your freedom to choose, you shatter that trap instantly. Choice turns weakness into strength. When a man thinks he must cling, he becomes needy. But when he realizes he can choose to walk away, his value skyrockets. When a man thinks he must prove himself, he exhausts his energy in validation. But when he chooses silence, he displays a strength no words can match. Every moment you remember you have a choice, you reclaim your power. The chains that once held you lose their grip, not because they disappeared, but because you stopped believing they were unbreakable. It is easy to underestimate the power of choice because it seems so simple. But simple doesn't mean weak. Choice is the foundation of freedom. It is the anchor of dignity, the birthplace of confidence, and the ultimate defense against manipulation. A man who knows he can choose will never be desperate. He may want something, but he will never need it so badly that he sells himself for it. That is what makes him untouchable. Manipulation thrives on the illusion of scarcity. It whispers, if you don't accept this, you'll never get another chance. If you don't hold on, you'll lose everything. If you don't bend, you'll be abandoned. But when you know choice is always yours, scarcity loses its power. You recognize that no single person, no single opportunity, no single moment defines your worth. You can choose again. You can rebuild, redirect, redefine. That is what makes manipulation collapse. It cannot survive in the presence of freedom. Consider a man who feels trapped in a toxic situation. He thinks he has no choice but to endure. That mindset drains him of strength. But the moment he realizes he does have a choice, to leave, to change, to refuse, the entire dynamic shifts. Even if he decides to stay, he stays from strength, not weakness. The difference is enormous. Choice transforms endurance into power. Choice is also the seed of respect. People may not like every choice you make, but they will respect the man who makes them with clarity and conviction. The man who refuses to be pushed, who refuses to be cornered, who refuses to live as though he is powerless is the man others cannot manipulate. His presence alone forces people to approach him differently. Every illusion of control depends on your blindness to choice. Once your eyes open, the game is over. You stop reacting, you start deciding. You stop begging, you start choosing. And in that moment, you step into a life no one else can dictate. Choice is not just an option. It is the real game changer, the single truth that dismantles every attempt to own you. Value comes from within, not from outside. No amount of external validation can ever outweigh the power of inner worth. Yet most men are trained, conditioned, and pressured to believe the opposite. From the earliest moments of life, you are taught to look outward for confirmation that you matter. A grade on a report card, a pat on the back, applause from the crowd, attention from the people you admire. These become the signals that define your value. The problem is, the more you rely on them, the less you recognize the source of your real strength. External validation is fleeting by design. It is temporary, conditional, and unstable. One day you are praised, the next day you are ignored. One moment you are admired, the next moment you are criticized. If your sense of worth depends on those shifting opinions, you will always live like a leaf in the wind, blown around by forces you cannot control. That is why a man who depends on validation never feels secure. Even when he has it, he fears losing it. Even when he is applauded, he fears the silence that might follow. He becomes addicted to reassurance because he has not built the foundation of worth inside himself. But the man who turns inward to define his value walks a completely different path. His sense of worth does not spike when others cheer, and it does not collapse when they fall silent. He understands that recognition is pleasant, but it is not the source. Respect is welcome, but it is not the root. His confidence is not a performance seeking approval. It is a state of being grounded in truth. Such a man does not live to be chosen. He lives because he has already chosen himself. Inner worth is built through discipline, self-respect, and the decisions you make when no one is watching. It is created when you hold to your principles, even when breaking them would be easier. It grows when you set a standard for yourself and refuse to compromise it for attention. The man who values himself from within becomes unshakable because nothing external can add or subtract from what he already knows. A compliment doesn't inflate him, and an insult doesn't deflate him. Both are recognized, but neither has the power to define him. This is why external validation is so dangerous when misunderstood. It is like sugar, sweet in the moment but unsustainable for real strength. A steady diet of it will leave you weak, dependent, and craving more. Inner worth, on the other hand, is like solid nutrition. It might not always be glamorous, but it builds lasting strength. It allows you to stand tall in silence, to carry yourself with dignity even when no one is clapping, to walk away from situations that do not honor you because you no longer need to beg for scraps of recognition. The paradox is that when you stop needing external validation, you often receive more of it. People are drawn to those who do not chase their approval. They admire those who stand firm without needing to be noticed. But by the time it arrives, it no longer controls you. You can accept it with gratitude without becoming addicted to it. You can hear applause without depending on it. You can face criticism without being destroyed by it. That balance is what separates true strength from fragile confidence. A man who defines his value internally cannot be manipulated by rewards or punishments, by attention or neglect. He knows his worth is not for sale. He knows validation is a bonus, not a necessity. And that is what makes him truly free. Because when you understand that value comes from within, you no longer spend your life chasing approval. You spend it living in alignment with who you really are. Detachment builds influence because the less you cling, the more magnetic you become. Most men are taught to chase, to hold on tightly, to fight for attention as if desperation will somehow create attraction. But clinging always weakens you. It signals fear, it exposes need, and it creates imbalance. The tighter you grip, the faster things slip away. Detachment, however, flips the dynamic entirely. When you are not bound by need, when you can stay calm whether someone stays or goes, you create a presence that draws people in naturally. Influence is not born from chasing, it is born from being. Clinging is rooted in scarcity, it whispers. If I let go, I'll lose everything. If I don't fight for this, it will vanish. If I don't prove my worth, I won't be chosen. That fear makes you behave in ways that destroy respect. You over-explain, you over-give, you over-apologize. In trying to secure someone's attention, you give away your dignity. And the tragic irony is that the very effort to hold on usually drives people further away. Neediness repels. Desperation suffocates. It signals that your sense of worth depends on something outside of yourself, and that dependence robs you of influence. Detachment, on the other hand, is not indifference. It is not coldness or lack of care. Detachment is strength. It is the ability to want without needing, to enjoy without clinging, to give without begging in return. It communicates that you are whole with or without the outcome. That energy is powerful because it cannot be controlled. It is magnetic because it creates mystery. People lean toward what they cannot easily grasp, and they respect what they cannot easily shake. When you are detached, you move differently. You speak with calm instead of panic. You act from choice instead of compulsion. You walk away when respect is missing instead of staying out of fear. That composure makes others take you seriously because they sense that your happiness is not in their hands. The less you cling, the more weight your presence carries. You stop chasing and suddenly people begin to chase you. You stop begging for attention and suddenly attention finds you. Detachment builds influence because it reverses the power dynamic. The person who clings gives power away while the person who can let go holds it. A man who can walk away has leverage. A man who can remain centered in silence carries more gravity than one who fills the air with desperation. Detachment transforms the framing instead of trying to fit into someone else's world. You stand firmly in your own, inviting others to join if they choose. That invitation is irresistible because it is free of pressure. The secret is that detachment is not about controlling others. It's about controlling yourself. It is about mastering your emotions so deeply that no situation can dictate your worth. It is about knowing that your value is not tied to whether someone stays or leaves, praises or criticizes, accepts or rejects. And when you reach that state, you naturally influence others because they sense you are free in a way most people are not. They see that you are not enslaved to approval, and they feel drawn to the stability you radiate. Magnetism is not about doing more, it is about needing less. The less you cling, the more confident you appear. The less you demand, the more respect you receive. The less you try to prove, the more undeniable you become. Detachment creates space, and space creates attraction. It is the paradox of influence. When you stop trying to control, you gain control. When you stop chasing, you begin to attract. And when you stop clinging, you discover that true power was never in holding on. It was always in letting go. Discipline creates freedom because mastering yourself is the one key that makes every strategy against you useless. Most men misunderstand freedom. They think freedom means doing whatever you feel like, chasing every impulse, indulging in every desire. But that version of freedom is an illusion, because if you are ruled by your impulses, you are not free, you are enslaved by them. True freedom is not the absence of rules, but the presence of self-mastery. It is the ability to govern your actions, to control your emotions, to direct your focus instead of being pulled in every direction. That is why discipline is not a cage, it is a weapon. It protects you from manipulation, from distraction, from weakness. Every game that seeks to control you relies on the same foundation, the expectation that you will lack discipline. Manipulation assumes you will chase what feels good in the moment instead of holding to what is right in the long term. It assumes you will trade your dignity for validation, your focus for comfort, your patience for quick rewards. But when you are disciplined, those strategies fail instantly. They cannot work on someone who is not controlled by craving. They cannot work on someone who can delay gratification. They cannot work on someone who chooses principles over impulses. Discipline is the silent shield. It is what allows you to stand firm when provoked, to walk away when tempted, to stay calm when challenged. Without discipline, you are fragile, easily swayed by words, easily rattled by games, easily thrown off course by emotion. But with discipline, you are steady. You do not crumble under pressure. You do not bend under manipulation, and you do not surrender your power for comfort. Discipline is the line between a man who is mastered by the world and a man who masters himself. Consider the difference between the man who trains his mind and body daily and the man who does only what he feels like. The first is freedom, freedom to endure, freedom to choose, freedom to resist. The second is chains, chains of laziness, chains of addiction, chains of fear. Discipline might feel heavy at first, but it is the very weight that makes you strong enough to carry yourself through life without dependence on others. It is the discipline of keeping promises to yourself that builds self-respect, and that respect cannot be taken away by anyone. The most dangerous man is not the one with the most resources or the loudest voice. It is the one who has mastered himself, because no trick works on him. He cannot be seduced by flattery or broken by rejection. He cannot be enslaved by pleasure or distracted by noise. He is free because his emotions, his habits, and his mind are under his command. That kind of man is unshakable, and that is why every attempt to control him collapses. Discipline also creates influence. People trust those who are consistent, who can be counted on, who hold their ground when others fold. Influence does not come from chaos, it comes from order. A disciplined man does not need to announce his strength. It is visible in the way he lives, in the way he refuses to be moved by anything that is not aligned with his principles. That steadiness is magnetic because it is rare. What discipline gives you is not a smaller life, but a bigger one. By mastering yourself, you gain the freedom to walk away from what insults your worth. You gain the freedom to stay focused on your mission when distractions try to pull you off course. You gain the freedom to choose your path instead of being herded into one. Discipline is not the enemy of freedom. It is its foundation. It is the practice of saying no to the things that weaken you so you can say yes to the life that strengthens you. Once you understand that, every strategy against you becomes powerless because nothing can control a man who has learned to control himself.